welcome back to another tutorial video. So I'm just gonna scroll slowly, and as I scroll through it, I'll just talk about what this video is about. So I did make a longer video, so if you watch that, you probably don't need this one, but I do talk a little bit about some project-specific details towards this one that I don't cover in that video, but if you watch that other video, you probably don't need this one. This is more of just for the more advanced people or the people that just want to like compare and contrast ideas. So it's a very simple portfolio. It's just a notebook and some image textures throughout the whole thing, which I'll show in a little bit. And then I'll just talk about some of the key takeaways that I learned from this project. And yes, it does infinitely loop, so you can go back and forth as many times as you want. Also, when I put award winning in my titles, it's not that I do these for an award. It's because I want to show you that you can actually win an award with pretty fairly simple websites compared to some of the other crazy things you see on the award shop. Like, I think every single thing that is on this channel so far is relatively simple when it comes down to technical knowledge of coding wise, and yet they still win awards because it's more just like the emotional storytelling that you give rather than technical complexity. So my whole point is like you can win one too. That's why I submit to awards, just to show you that you can win as well. Now what I actually want to mention is an article I wrote on Codrops that is associated with this experience, and it's a lot more important than the award or the experience itself. It's about abuse and like kind of where I feel like the industry is heading, at least in its current state, and how it's going to get better over time. As someone that was abused, not just by family members, but also by workplaces, I decided to write it in order to help possibly protect some people. So if you feel alone, if you are abused, feel free to reach out as well if you need someone to talk to. Okay, so the first thing I did was use Krita, but there's so many other options like Affinity and Procreate, whatever you want to use, Photoshop. You could even do it in Blender if you want to, but I used Krita to draw some stuff. Everything that I wanted to like move or select was on a separate layer. That way I could just export it as a separate image texture to use into Blender. And then I just come over here to Tools, Scripts, and it should be Export Layers over here. And then you just select the one that you want. So Actual Panda here, navigate to your location, and I'm changing it to PNG so it supports transparency. And I'm leaving Adjust Export Size to Layer Content off. That way everything shares the same canvas size, which I kept 3000 by 3000, which is kind of overkill, but yeah, and you'll see why in a little bit. So if I go back into Blender, I'll just show you what it is. It's literally just a bunch of planes with image textures. Let me go into render view and just show you that. That is literally all it is, including the writings themselves. I wrote those as image textures and I just put them on a plane like so. Now, the reason I had all images use the same canvas size, well, not all of them, but most of them, especially the ones that I'm going to replace, is because that way I don't have to update the UV and it kind of just looks like an overlap. So this is Moving Panda, and I just switched to a different outfit like Samurai Panda, or like Pirate Panda or something like that. You can see it doesn't move, so I don't really have to make any UV adjustments or any manual adjustments in code. Now, what I did in the project was inefficient. I had 4 different planes, and I just baked them all separately. Oh, sorry, yeah, obviously duplicate the material and whatnot. Yeah, so I had like, I think I had each of these on one separate plane, and then I just baked them, and I used 4 different textures to switch between. I know it would just be easier just to make like a sprite sheet of all 4 of them and then just offset the UV a constant amount. That way I don't have to manage 4 different textures. I did not do it that way because it would have taken an extra like 10 minutes. So I just decided just to put them all on 4 different planes and then have them swap in code. I think as anyone that is working on a project, it's more important to have fun than always optimizing everything. As long as you know what to do for a quote-unquote real project, you should be good to go. Now, everything that was moving, I separated out because, you know, when you like bake things over each other, it's gonna have a shadow. So if I put the bike wheel on top over here, or even behind, either the bike is gonna get a static shadow, or the wheel is going to get a static black shadow there, and they'll show as I rotate. So that's why I kept everything separate. And then once I was done baking, I placed everything back into the scene where I wanted them to be. So as you can see, I just baked everything according to their section. I didn't bother separating and optimizing much at all. Like I could just bake one of these right and instant them. I just literally just used multiple planes and just bake them on a single texture just to save time. Okay, now for each section, except the first one, I had one 4K texture. So for the ocean one, I had one. this one had one, and then this one also had one. Now it looks a little bit awkwardly offset. I could have fixed that, but I didn't because I just wanted to move on, so I didn't bother aligning stuff and whatnot. So that's why it looks a little bit funky that I'm baking this here. And I did have some texture painting on the ground. That's why you see the color in the portfolio. I no longer have access to that image because I deleted it, but I just use texture painting to paint like the grass and the water and everything like that as well. Yeah, and I just use multiply to mix the image or the texture paint with the paper one by itself. So if I just get rid of that, you can see that's just the default image texture, and then I just mix it with my own drawing one. And then I use the alpha channel to cut it out basically. You can see that this is the baked setup. Sorry, let me just go. I don't have the images anymore. But after I bake them, I just organize them like so. You can see that I just place everything back where I need them. I do want to mention that each moving object, it was baked on its own texture. So the camel, the ship, all those shared the same texture. You could totally put each scene's moving character as part of its own texture, like the bicycle as part of first scene texture, and that's like totally perfectly valid as well. Yeah, so if I go back to the code here, you can see that each one of these was a GLB file. So if I come over here, come to models, you can see each of those was a GLB file, and I just loaded texture and I just used it. So here you can see panda. I load each separate texture instead of one sprite sheet. Again, this is bad, but it was a lot faster to do than making a sprite sheet. Okay, I actually want to cover some stuff that I did in the other project that I should have done for this project. And one of them would have a naming convention. That way I could just write a script to automatically populate the textures rather than manually doing it myself. So I actually wrote a Blender script. Well, sorry, I used AI to generate a Blender script that would take like the first format over here and just attach it to each mesh name in the bake. This allowed me to write an easy script to detect which texture I should be using just based on the naming convention. So if I come into my package.json, you can see that over here I have this custom script here called gen models, and I used AI to generate this script over here. Basically what it'll do is like use the file name itself to replace texture names. You can see all my textures also have the same naming convention, so that really helps when it's like using regex strings. Is that what they call them? Reject strings to easily replace stuff. So basically the idea is I place any object that I want in raw assets, so it'll do multiple at the same time. I just have one there, and I'll just npm run gen models, and actually let me copy this one first just so I don't overwrite it, and it will output the new scene right over here. And you can see it has a lot of default settings related to the project here. I imported my custom texture loader. It pathed to my texture public folder for me. It finds all those relative ones, again, based on the scene name here. And then it also detects that based on my geometry, also using the same ID here. And you can see this last index here is hooking up to the texture associated with it. There's a lot of other changes. For example, it adds the /models for both of the file paths here, so I don't have to waste time doing that. And then by default, npx gltf.jsx does not have default here, so it also automatically adds default as well. So let me just show you what that would look like if I use the command line tool or this online tool here. You can see no defaults, no hooked up textures, and it uses a hardcore position here, and it also has cast shadow and receive shadow. Again, this was fully written by AI. And here you can just see the npx gltf JSX script though. Okay, so when it comes to the camera movement, basically all I did was I made two curves, and then I used that custom Blender add-on that you can find in the description that I wrote with AI just to export it as a JavaScript file of control points. So they're both just camel ROM curves over here. You can see this one is for the camera, and then this one is used for the panda. Now I do want to talk about the brief looping. So when it comes to the looping, there's a lot of ways to handle this. I did a pretty weird way. Basically what I did was I shifted all the points over here every time we reached a threshold, and it would initiate a transition curve, like something like this. It'll enter your transition curve, and then it'll hop off the transition curve and go to the next set of points. Now, I did it that way because I felt like it was easier to do it that way. The other common way is like every time you hit like a point, it will just shift the next point, and then you hit this point, and then it'll shift the next point. Now, I felt like this was a little bit more math heavy because all my rotation logic was based on the scroll progress value, and every time you shift a point, it's going to change that 0 to 1 range of the curve, and I didn't want to deal with that. So here you can see in my curve file, I have two curves. I have the camera curve and I have the panda curve. My moving objects for this one, unlike the other one, not path on the curve, I just made it go left and right basically. And in my hook over here, you can see I've used scroll curve. So basically you can see what it does. It takes the last point of the first curve as a starting position, and it takes the first point of the shifted curve as its ending point. So that is basically the transition curve itself. And then here is where I just shift the curve points. Now, one issue I had with the transition curve is because it's only between 2 points and it still has the value between 0 and 1, the scrolling was extremely slow when I was on that transition curve because I'm not going much of a distance, but I'm still scrolling the full way. Whereas when I get onto the main curve over here, you can see that because the points are, there's so many points, the same scroll that I do on a tick is going to travel a lot farther than on the transition curve. Now, I solved this issue by having a scroll speed multiplier, and if I was on the transition curve, I would multiply it by 6. Now, this is bad because what would happen is, as you can see, as I enter the transition curve and exit it, there's like some sort of force here. Now, the reasons for that is because basically, if you leave it at 6, your scroll progress is going to jump up really fast. So when you enter the new shifted curve, it's going to like teleport or jump a really, really far distance because your scroll progress would be like 0.3 and it'll just like jump to 0.3 progress on your next scroll. So what I did to manage that was even cheekier. Right before the end of the curve, change it back to 1, but even then, if you scroll too fast, you can see that it's just going to jump a little bit. So it only works when you scroll smoothly, and that's fine as well. So what I should have done instead was actually a lot easier, and I don't know why I didn't think of it, but I should have just multiplied the new progress value itself rather than play with the scroll speed multiplier. Waterfall was the same inefficient method as I did with the panda. I just baked 2 separate textures and swapped between 2 textures instead of using a sprite sheet. Also, here is what it looks like from farther away. So basically the idea is I baked a single sheet. So here you can see that I baked a single sheet over here. I used an array modifier just for planning purposes, but I baked a single sheet and I just used them 6 different times over here. I could have instanced them for better performance, but I did not do that because it was just not important for this project. But of course there's like some lighting issues over here, which you could adjust for if you want to, but I didn't do it. You do see it when you scroll and move your mouse down a little bit depending on your screen size, but yeah, that's kind of what it looks. Here you can see that's how I managed the transition. Then once I get here, all this stuff after I get at a certain point here will shift to the end of this curve as well. I don't know if you can see that over here or not. Oh no, I do it about like 60% of the way, so you won't be able to see it, but yeah. So about 70% of the way, that's when it starts interacting the shift. Now, some other cool stuff from the other video that I didn't do in this project was you can like bulk compress your images rather than doing it one at a time. So here, I again generated this with Gemini, I think. And basically it's a PowerShell command that you run in your PowerShell, and it'll find all the images in your folder and convert them to KTX2. So here you can see that is my basis command over there. I also generated another one that uses ImageMagick to resize to WebP and 204080 by 204080. I tried both of them, KTX and WebP. It didn't really matter for that project, but I ended up using WebP. So yeah, that's just this one and these both command line tools. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for all the major things. Everything else you see is AI slop code. Basically, I just asked the AI to attach refs to each object and then just give it some sort of like sign animation over time. Now, if you do want a step-by-step tutorial and a lot more in-depth and other techniques, you can check over here. I break everything down in a much more beginner-friendly way than this video. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Peace out and bye.